Prime Minister Theresa May admitting there has been far too much tolerance of extremism in our country. This as she vows to introduce tougher punishments and a new crackdown on radical ideology. But is she part of the problem?
Here to weigh in is Jim Hansen. He is the president of the Security Studies Group, also led counterterrorism operations in the Army Special Forces. Jim, thanks so much for coming back this half hour. I guess just to start off, how do you feel about how Theresa May has handled this so far?
Well, she has a reputation for having cut some of the police budgets and been a little soft on immigration. But I got to be honest, I was very pleased with some of the things in her statement yesterday. She first admitted that they had been too tolerant of extremism. She said she was going to stop safe spaces for extremists in the UK. That is a direct call to the Muslim community to make sure they are not tolerating these guys in their own midst. And she also said that they're going to do increased custodial detention. You know, they've got a massive terrorism watch list. I got to be honest, I don't want them watching the terrorists. I want them scarfing them up, putting them in a dark hole and putting the screws to them so they can find out before these attacks happen that they're coming and stop them.
Well, so far they've already arrested 12 people in connection with what happened on Saturday night. That's a step in the right direction.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, you know, if you've got that terror watch list, let's round up as many as we can. You know, let me know when you get to 1,000 of them scarfed up, and then you can put those guys and start comparing their stories, find out who they're talking to, go through their social media, look at everything to find out who are the ones behind the larger radicalization, and let's get them out of play.
Well, she talked about social media as well, and addressing that. What do you think about going online and dealing with some of these networks? They have a huge network they're able to reach to some of these lone wolves, if you will, just sitting in their home, you know, in a dark room.
You know, I think it's a good idea to look for bad things happening on the internet. I'm a little concerned about the British government deciding what content should be seen by who. I believe George Orwell had a little bit to say about that, and it didn't go well. So I'm not a big fan of censorship, but I'm a big fan of surveillance and scrutiny of people we already know have bad tendencies. Let's look at them and let's stop the next attack rather than cleaning up after it.
Well, and I think as we see more and more of these attacks and people get more and more frustrated and scared, you're going to see people move a little bit more in that direction where we're more comfortable with more surveillance, with rounding people up when they're just, you know, suspected of maybe wanting to do something. Whereas I think when we feel safe, people start to think, well, why do we have to be so strict? We start talking about things like unnecessary surveillance. But, I mean, I don't think anybody, if you've got nothing to hide, you shouldn't be worried about being surveilled, should you?
Well, there is a fine line between privacy and security that we don't want to cross. The United States has very strict rules, the Brits do too, about what you can do. But in the New York City, the police have actually had to stop surveillance of mosques because of lawsuits and threats from the Council on American Islamic Relations and other Islamist groups because they don't want to offend them. I'm sorry, your right to be offended does not trump the American and British people's right to be free from the radicals who are hanging out in those mosques.
And to survive.
Should we have surveillance on those mosques here in the U.S.?
I think we need to. There are places where if you actually heard what they're saying inside the mosques, you'd be horrified. After the Orlando attacks where a terrorist hit a gay nightclub, he had been in places where they were saying the penalty under Islam for homosexuality is death. That was being preached in mosques in the United States. That's unacceptable, and we need to be looking there and telling them that that can't happen.
That is absolutely the problem. All right, thank you so much for coming on, Jim.